Carrie Adams, and you're listening to Carrie's Connoisseurs, coming to you from Solid Gold Podcasts. Here we talk to the movers and shakers, the drinkers, the dreamers, and all the people who make it happen in the liquor and luxury industries from around the world. Happy day. I've got Jeremy Sampson in the studio with me. Jeremy is the Managing Director of Brand Finance Africa. It's very lofty and very, very important. Thank you for joining me, Jeremy, on Carrie's Connoisseurs.
It's always my privilege and my pleasure. And we were trying to work out how long it's been. It must be best part of a decade that we've done this.
It must be, because we started doing this when I was doing a program at Classic FM.
In Braamfontein.
And that was in Brahmies before they moved to Melrose even. And I think that that's a good 15 years ago. I don't know.
Actually, you're right. I think it could be.
I think it is.
Yes.
Anyway, cheers. It's morning, so we haven't got wine, but we've got water. Thank you. The reason that we're talking, of course, is because every year Jeremy and I get together and discuss that was the year that was in the wine world. And we give you some tips. Not really tips, just our favourites that we've drunk during the year that we think we might like to either receive as a gift for Christmas or for the holidays, or that we think might go nicely with a Christmas lunch or dinner. And you and Sharon always have these fantastic lunches and dinners that you make. What did you drink during the year that you think might be a goodie?
You know, we've come out of COVID this year, which I think we forget. Because the beginning of this year we were still really within COVID, and it's gathered momentum increasingly, I found, over the year. In fact, only 3 weeks ago I was down in Franschhoek and travelling around and having a look and seeing what was going on. And I must say, it looks as though people have survived COVID.
Of course they did, because they're a load of bollocks to start with. You know me. I just thought that fear-mongering made me so cross. We won't even go there. We won't even talk about it. And I think that in 50 years' time, everybody is going to say, how on earth did we allow that to happen?
Well, you go to the Franschhoek area and it's thriving.
Good.
Stellenbosch is thriving. In fact, the whole Western Cape, as we know, is thriving for other reasons as well.
It's thriving because they're the only people with power.
Well, and not a pothole in sight. And driving around, I forgot that you actually have to allow for roadworks, so you actually have to be stuck waiting for the traffic to go one way or the other.
About that,
which we've forgotten about. So, no, look, when you say what are the wines, also another big event for me at least, you know, you're in the wine industry all the time.
Yes.
But 2 months ago, the Cape Wine Guild having their tasting before the auction, and that again was, I think, about 35 wines.
I was in hospital for that, so I missed it.
Oh, it was special, very special.
I'm so sad that I missed it. It's the first time in many years that I couldn't get there. There must have been some really nice ones.
Well, the chairperson now is Mr. Newton-Johnson Jr.
I know, isn't he gorgeous?
And, you know, the Newton-Johnson wines, to start with, you know, in Hemel and Hard are incredible. And I believe the restaurant is just as good as it was.
And I think that Bevan has remarried. Is it Bevan whose wife died?
That I don't know about the domestic.
Ah, well, he is such a gorgeous child, and he went through a terribly, terribly unhappy time. His wife was sick.
Oh, dear.
They had 2 little children, I think, and he lost his wife. But I think I read somewhere that he'd met a lovely new girl, and they've subsequently married. So.
Well, good luck to him.
Yeah.
And now, of course, the previous year was the Molyneux.
Yes.
And she was the chair for a time.
Yes.
And so that was very special, I think, you know, having a lady.
That guild has done really well, I think.
Yes.
It's ticked all its boxes, you know. It's done well.
And of course we've had Platter in the last 10 days has come out, and the top estate is Molyneux again. And that's what, 4th of 5 years or something.
I know, it's extraordinary. I think it's the only estate in the country that has 3 consecutive wins, and then they skipped one, and then they had another one sort of thing. That they've just done incredibly well.
You see, I think back a decade or so, and perhaps the South African wine fraternity will not like me reminding them, but at KWV they had an Australian winemaker, Richard Rowe, and they won it for about 4 years in a row. In fact, they were winning everything. And then they got to a point...
He was really smart. He made such smart wine. He really did.
I have to say I learnt a lot from him, because he was...
Where is Richard now?
He's in Margaret Valley. That's in Australia. He's gone back to his home. And he used to come out 3 times a year. And he used to love it. And he helped bring up KWB. Now, of course, they don't enter Platter for the most part, so they're not listed, which to me is rather sad.
Why don't they? Do we know why?
I heard that they were somewhat upset with a person who was judging their wines, and so they threw a frothy and said, "We're out of here." And I think perhaps Laborie is back in, because people forget that there's KWB and there's Laborie, and of course I think their brandies are in as well.
They would have to be, because they make some of the best brandy in the country.
Gorgeous.
Really beautiful. Yeah. So we've ascertained that hopefully tourism is on the up. People are hopefully going to stop being quite so paranoid. And I say that in the best possible way. I mean, it was perfectly understandable why people were terrified. But you have to be missing a chromosome like me to not give a rat's you-know-what. I mean, I just couldn't believe that the human race had spent thousands of years fighting for freedom and liberty. And then we were told what T-shirts we could wear and what shoes we may or may not wear, closed or open, or long-sleeve T-shirts or short-sleeve T-shirts. And I just thought, no, we really have reached bollock status here.
But now at the moment...
We really have.
What is it with South Africa? We always hear how we're resilient, but we're putting up with absolute rubbish from Eskom. Rubbish is the understatement of the century. And we put up with it.
Well, as we sit here today in this studio, my darling, gorgeous sound engineer battles his you-know-whats off every day because we don't have enough time to get generators and inverters and things back up to where they need to be. We need internet. We need, it's just...
Well, I had a time from 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon for 47 hours and 40 minutes of nothing. So it doesn't matter how many batteries or inverters you've got, it's flat as a pancake. And trying to charge my phone off my computer. And then we had it on for 20 minutes, and boom, at 2 o'clock, this was on Wednesday, out it went again.
No. It's the 21st century.
No, we're in the dark ages.
Elon's sending people, he's building houses on Mars, and we can't turn the lights on. It's just alarming, isn't it? Well, anyway, that's depressing, and that's not what we're going to talk about.
No, we're going to talk about wine.
We're going to talk about gorgeous wine that's going to enhance our holiday season. And for those of you who celebrate Christmas, what we're going to do, what are you and Sharon cooking for Christmas?
I know that we're going to our daughter on Christmas Eve, and I think that'll be a traditional. She's sort of taken over the responsibilities of the family, which is nice.
It's quite nice to hand that over, hey?
And we'll see. But
so turkeys and gammons and things?
All those classic things, yes. And then we might do something totally different, like some Scottish salmon poached, with some nice capers and lemon and things like that. And perhaps a nice Sauvignon Blanc or a nice Chenin to cut through the whole thing.
So speaking of those, which ones would you recommend? What have you tasted this year that you really like?
Well, I think it was this program last year. You told me that Groote Post had come out with...
That's sea salter.
Exactly.
It's still delicious. Their new vintage is just as delicious as their last one. Did you taste it?
I must say, I've drunk quite a bit of that in the last year. And I'm not a Sauvignon Blanc fan.
Me neither.
I'm a Chenin person. For Chardonnay, I was brought a bottle of the flagship Bartony Chardonnay,
and was that
an
lovely?
hourglass, and it was quite special. It was very, very special. But there are so many good wines. It's getting better and better. We're spoilt for choice with Platter. Even Michael Fridgen, I think, is commenting on how many 5-star awards they're giving out, and 4.5 and 4. The quality of the wine is going up tremendously. And with the reds, well, what are the classics? The Takaras, the Thelemas. When I was down in Franschhoek, we actually had an old-fashioned South African wine, if I can say that without being rude.
What did you have?
A Delheim Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot, which was stewed fruit and
this gorgeous. Reminds us of Spats Sperling, doesn't it? He was such a gorgeous character in the industry, but his daughter's doing a great job of running that farm at this stage of the game.
Brilliant wine.
Yeah, really, really good. So I have tasted I've tasted a lot of stuff this year.
Surprise.
The one thing that I interviewed Charles Back
of Fairview.
and the reason I interviewed him is because his Malbec, his Fairview 2021 Malbec, won Celia Gilloway's Malbec competition.
Now, who's Celia Gilloway?
Celia Gilloway has honestly put together more wine shows. She did Old Mutual for Michael Fredron, she did Diners Club, she did Wine Magazine for many, many years, and she's sort of semi-retired now, but she's doing a series of competitions which I think is quite clever. They're quite under the radar. And she puts together tasting panels that constitute sort of the man in the street, the retailer, the wine expert, the winemaker. She makes, she makes a mix. So there's nice broad spectrum.
Yep.
And they do win awards and they do get stickers for their wine, and it is audited by a proper firm of auditors. So it's all properly above board and what have you. But she takes unusual cultivars. She puts quite a lot of emphasis on unusual cultivars in South Africa. She does the normal run-of-the-mills as well, like the Cabernets and the Sauvignon Blanc and that sort of thing. But it does tend to cater for the smaller producers who maybe can't afford to enter a big competition.
Yep.
Or who don't have the stock, the endless amounts of stock to give away as samples and this, that, and the next thing that is sometimes required for competitions. It's a nice man in the street. It's every man's competition. That's how I could like.
It's so good to hear of something like that, because sometimes I look at these glossy books and it's advertorial. People have paid to enter.
Yes.
And you think, where's so-and-so, where's so-and-so?
Exactly
they haven't paid, or they don't have deep enough pockets,
or they
or whatever.
don't think the taster's going to do the right thing by their wine. Or, a lot of people don't enter their wine in case they don't win.
Yeah. And I can understand that, but some of the smaller estates now. Well, I'm using the word estates. Perhaps I shouldn't, because so many brands now are buying in the grapes. They don't have any physical estate at all. Yeah,
exactly that. So a few weeks ago, she invited me down to chair the panel on Malbec, and surprise, surprise, Charles Beck's Fairview Malbec 2021 won.
Wow.
Jamie, if I tell you that it is, I think, and I stand corrected, I might be wrong by a few 10 Rand either way or whatever, but I think it's about 120 Rand a bottle. And it had that typical robust, Malbec is sort of quite a lot of the backbone and the inky black colour component of a typical Bordeaux-style blend.
And people think of Argentine, don't they?
They think of Argentine.
So it's a nice big steak and a glass of Malbec.
Exactly that.
In the Andes or whatever it is in Argentina.
That. So there weren't a huge amount. I think there were 35 entrants or something, because there's not a huge amount of single variety Malbecs in South Africa. But here came the Fairview 2021, and it honestly is delicious at 120 odd Rand a bottle.
And where would you get that from? Direct from them?
You can get direct from Charles, but Charles has an amazing distribution setup. He's a clever guy. He really has been one of the cornerstones of the South African wine industry, and he's just got this gorgeous way about him. He's so
full of energy.
He's so cool. He's really cool. So Charles's wines are available in all the supermarkets. So you can get it at Checkers, you can get it at Pick and Pay, you can get it at Norman Goodfellows, you can get Fairview almost anywhere. And if you don't meet with any success, I know that they have an online portal that you can go and buy online. Right. Most of the wineries do now, and you can order direct from them. So that red wine, I thought, if we're lucky enough and Christmas brings us nice weather in Johannesburg, which sometimes can be a little bit sort of duvet under the covers and lamps and chocolates and puppies.
We don't know, do we?
We never know. But if it's hot and sort of summery, I could imagine a really, really delicious steak on the Weber with a bottle of that Fairview.
Well, I'm hearing that people are getting worried now about having functions if we have a power outage for 1, 2, 3 days. So the Webers and Bryes or whatever are coming to the fore. In fact, I have to say, 2 nights ago, I had pork, chicken and salmon in foil all on the same fire, obviously at different times, and some potatoes in foil in the charcoal.
Yeah, you see.
Trying to put together a meal. And use up things that were in the freezer, and the freezer wasn't freezing, so it was going off. So my dear wife brought out all this stuff, and I said, how am I going to fit all this on? But anyway, we did.
I know. Well, I think that the Weber's quite a good option at this stage of the game for all kinds of reasons.
And turkey in the Weber is incredible.
Now,
with that smokiness that comes through.
Turkey and the Weber is probably the best you're going to get, but I'll tell you another trick about turkey. Last year, or maybe the year before, I don't know, I spent Christmas Day with a friend of mine, Rob Brown, who is also ebullient, full of love of life. He's a gorgeous man. And he made a turkey Thanksgiving style, which was in a pot of boiling oil this big, that he had some kind of a flamethrower in the kitchen, that he had this burning cauldron of oil, and he immersed the turkey in this oil for like an hour. Just that. Took it out, the skin was as crispy and brown and gorgeous as ever, and inside the turkey was succulent and juicy. I don't want to say moist, everybody always says, there are other things that I want moist, not my turkey. So he did this thing. It took 1 hour, immersed in boiling oil, but you have to get that oil to boil vigorously. Yes. And it was the best turkey I've ever tasted.
Wow.
So that's good for turkey. And speaking turkey, I've told you my red wine, which is the Fairview Malbec. But speaking turkey, I love to do Chardonnay with turkey. I love to do Chardonnay with anything, actually, but I do it with turkey. And there have been some such delicious Chardonnays. A few weeks ago, I had a tasting with Andrew Gunn. And we tasted his single vineyard from Iona. Yeah. We tasted his single vineyards, the Kloof, the Kroon, and the Fynbos. They range between 2018 and 2019 vintage. Honestly, Jeremy, those Chardonnays are beautiful.
But he's Elgin, as I recall, and Paul Kluver is next door as well.
Quite right, and Andries Berg is also making the most beautiful.
And that whole area, beautiful, beautiful wines. And I noticed a lot of the Stellenbosch people now have bought up real estate in that Elgin area.
Well, Freda and List have vineyards in Elgin and make absolutely delicious Chardonnay from there. But Andrew Gunn's single vineyard, they're quite pricey. But hey, it's Christmas time, it's holidays.
When you say quite pricey, what are you talking?
Quite pricey, I'm talking around 500 Rand a bottle.
That's the thing that's happened this year.
Yeah.
Prices have gone up quite.
I was going to speak to you about that branding and pricing and what have you. So they are quite pricey. He has other ones that are not single vineyard, and they're also nice. But these are just special. They're just really special. So you can buy yourself one bottle of really super special, and then you revert to the sea salter, which is still the best value for money white wine in a bottle.
Fantastic. And that's what, about 120 or whatever it is?
I know, it's amazing. So we're talking price. It's quite interesting to see the evolution of pricing in South Africa. And I'm not sure which side of the fence I fall on. Michael Fridjon says the winemakers must put the prices up. We're the cheapest wine sip for sip in the world. But then we're the cheapest a lot sip for sip in the world. You know what I mean? We're the cheapest of a lot of things in the world. There are not many places in the world that I know of where you can still live the quality of life that we can manage to live here. Eating meat a couple of times a week, lovely fish. I mean, it's not just snook or something, it's salmon and tuna fish and what have you. We live well in South Africa, really, at a relatively low price, don't you think? Or am I dreaming?
No, I think you're making a good point. We need to step back from the whole thing. We have a lot of good things going for us.
Yes.
Let's park Eskom for a minute and let's park,
that's just
park
rubbish.
the politics for a minute. Yeah. But no, our inflation is high-ish, but not as high as a lot of places.
Yes.
We have summer.
Weather's great.
We have a lot of good things, and
if you've got some money in the bank, the interest rate's quite good this year.
That's right. And talking Michael Fridjon, he and I have had discussions where I said, well, we want more people in Soweto and what were townships to be wine drinkers, and that's, I think, got to be the future. So what's wrong with having a box wine that costs, 2 litres at 60 Rand or whatever it is?
See, a lot of people are putting their wine in boxes again.
And that's cost effective,
Yeah.
it's nice, it gets people into wine, and as you've just said, on a special occasion, okay, let's have a special bottle. And it might be 100, 200, 400, 500. But when you get up to the Villafonte levels of 12,
2,000.
1300, 2000,
Yes.
okay, that's a very, very small niche market, but I'm all for bringing people in to drinking wine, and the quality, you know, some of those KWB boxes, fantastic quality.
I think those box wines are absolutely fine, and I think that there are a lot of people who have started. I was chatting to Wendy Applebaum, who's a mate of mine, as you know, and I think they
Well,
put
De Morganson.
they put De Morganson into boxes, and I think they're selling quite well overseas. And I think a lot of people are putting wine into little cans in Europe. So I'm not fussed about any of that. What I do worry about is people pricing our wine out of the market, and that's difficult because you want the farmer to realize as much as he possibly can for the wine and the effort and the time and the love and whatever it is. It takes money to put wine into a bottle, but you also don't want it to be so extortionate that the man in the street can't afford. How do we find a balance? I don't know.
But I'm agreeing with you, but then with a daughter overseas and friends overseas, they send me a picture of a bottle of South African wine in a restaurant down in Cornwall going for 55 British pounds a bottle, when I know in South Africa you can get it for under 100 rand. And people are saying that the British restaurateurs' biggest profit margin they're getting out of anything is South African wines.
Because of the value for money. I know.
And they're selling because at £55 the quality is still exquisite.
Well, I'll have to give your daughter my son's contact details because he's just gone into a wine business in England, and it's only South African wine. So I'll give her his details, and she won't have to pay that much money for a bottle of South African wine.
And she'll be delighted.
She'll be delighted.
I know her husband is fixated on Meerlust, but I think we can ease him off that.
We can ease him off. We won't tell Hannes. Anything else that you think we should be drinking for Christmas or New Year? I mean, we've done Christmas.
Let's just finish off on, I find it also interesting the emergence or the profiles of second label wines coming up a little bit, because if you're going to price your wines, let's say 500, 600 upwards, there needs to be again a lower entry level perhaps. And again, Molyneux, who are doing absolutely incredibly, I think they might have a bit of a branding situation coming along with Mr. Singh of Lure, but when you look at their second label, which is Kloof Street, which is about, just under 100 or just over 100
No,
a
it's
bottle.
actually quite expensive now. It's about 150 or 160. I think it's become quite expensive.
Well, that's gone up a lot then in the last few years.
It has gone up quite a lot, and I think that, listen, the wine is worth it, but I think that it does detract from its sexiness when you're in the store and you've got, a tighter budget. But if you look at R.D. Badenhorst, for example, with his Secateurs label, which is also his entry-level label from the Swartland, his is around about 120 or something like that, which is really good value for money.
Very good value.
Stage of the game.
Yeah, he's gone quiet lately as well. I don't know what, he's usually a larger-than-life person.
When he's quiet, there's something brewing. There's something naughty on the go. Yeah.
Very naughty. And of course, there's Mr. Duncan Savage, who, when I walked into the Cape Wine Guild, he strode up and said hello, and he's just been again on Platter, I think voted almost the personality, and then of course there's Mr. Eben Sadie, who very quietly is still producing incredible wines, which most of us can't afford.
Charles and I were speaking about the Swartland this morning, because if there were to be a king of the Swartland, it has to be Charles Back. I mean, he's been there since, Pa fell off the bus, he's been there since 1995. And we were just talking about the wines of the Swartland Co-op.
Oh, yeah.
Also in a box.
Yes, yes.
But listen, give those kids their due. They've done an amazing marketing job. You must be proud of them.
The Swartland, the way it's come up it's only the last decade or so, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember driving through there to Paternoster probably the first time 20 years ago, with a cornfields or whatever, and now the wines, and if you go to places like Rebec Castile, there's a lovely little wine shop next door to an art gallery there, and going into a place and like 80% of the wines I've never heard of before.
I know. Charles and I were chatting, actually, interestingly enough, he's very excited about Darling.
Yes.
which is where our sea salter comes from. He is very excited about the terroirs, the soils, and the conditions of growing and making wine in Darling.
But I wonder if they're changing cultivars, because Darling is a hot area already.
Well, you know,
and with global warming?
I don't know. I don't think global warming is changing the climate that much that it's going to have that much of a difference, marked difference.
Because I hear of Mediterranean cultivars being brought in and people experimenting.
Well, they've always been. I mean, the Cape has a Mediterranean climate, and we have similar soils to the Mediterranean. So there's nothing new about that. We should have been experimenting with Mediterranean grape varieties a long time ago. And some people did.
Yes.
Some people did. But there's a lot of them coming into South Africa now, and they're making for such interesting wines. You know, David Nieuwoud, another one of my favorite boyfriends, he is making wines with at Maras. The winemaker's name escapes me now. I've still got COVID brain. If anybody out there can tell me what you take for COVID brain.
But David is such a quiet, gentle man. And you know, and then they produce magic in a bottle.
No, he's such fun. He's just the biggest, fattest fun. We'll do a thing one day with the three of us on here, and you'll see his energy is so boundless. You have to sort of bring Riddle into the interview, you know. He is so over the... Anyway, he's making some lovely wines in the Swartland with a couple of the kids. And then, of course, there's things like... I have to mention it, because nobody really knows about it yet. But have you tasted Bacco?
No. Bacco.
You need to know about Bacco. It's Bacco. And Bacco...
Right, tell all your viewers.
Bacco as in Bacchus, Bacchum, Bacillium.
Yes.
Bacco have produced a wine called Prelude. And I won't bore you with the whole history of it, because I will have Nati Jankelowitz on my show with me one day. But he is the nicest man. I always thought he was a QS, but I think he told me the other day that he's not a quantity surveyor, he's a something else. But he's a building something. Clever guy, been in the building trade for many, many, many years, always wanted a wine farm. Finally bought one about 7-8 years ago. Right next door to Villefontaine. Run down, he's turned it into the most gorgeous little place. Long story short, he got Martin Smith, who is now making Passerine, as you know. And Martin Smith, who worked with Zelmerlong, and Phil Fries, who are the husband and wife team at Villefontaine from America.
Oh,
fabulous duo.
Yes.
Probably the most successful
She was the
duo in the
winemaker,
world.
he was the viticulturist. Yeah.
Best duo in the world.
Yeah.
And Martin Smith had the benefit of their mentorship for 9 years. And he made the first vintage of Bacco Prelude. And I think it's just delicious. It's a Bordeaux style blend. It's about 250 Rand a bottle. And it's just what you want it to be. It's quite elegant. It's polished and clean. It's got lovely pure fruit on it. It's not over oaked. In fact, that has to be our New Year wine.
Well, perhaps the new year also is to try new things.
New things.
Bacco, which I'd never heard of before. Let's do that.
Well, I'm going to send you a bottle of Bacco for you and Sharon to have on New Year's Eve. It's lovely. And you can buy it at Norman Goodfellows. I think you can buy it at Colleen Morris's place as well.
Oh, wine menu.
Wine menu.
Yes.
You can probably get it at Dry Dock if you're in Parkhurst.
Yeah.
And then I feel so northern suburbs-ish because I don't know where else it would be. I don't know about Edenvale or Glen Vista or Durban or Cape Town. I don't know. But look for Bacco. Look it up online and you'll see where it's available. I'm going to get you a bottle for you and Sharon. It's delicious.
But then you mentioned the magic word bubbles. What are the bubbles? Well, perhaps we should even take a step back, because you were chairing the Diners Club this year, and some of those personalities, and I don't know if any of them are involved in bubbles.
Well, no. Who was with me this year? Oh, I had Hervé de la Besse, the gorgeous Frenchman, because we always have one international judge, and Hervé is an importer of French and Spanish and Italian wines. So he's got Philippinat, which is gorgeous bubbly, and he's got a couple. He's got Lallier. He's got a few French bubbles. French bubbles are a big problem. Big problem. They're in dire straits. There aren't enough of them. So Moet and Verve have been out of stock for a lot of the time this year. And you're going to have to start looking, I think, to some local bubbles to take the place of what was the sort of more affordable French.
But that's fine, yeah.
So if we're going local bubbly, what's your favourite?
Well, I might shock you by saying Steenberg had a bubbles.
Sauvignon Blanc.
Yes, a bubbles, which I remember drinking
a cup. Maybe bubbly out of Sauvignon Blanc, but I know what you're saying.
And I was shocked when I drank it the first time.
I know, it's delicious.
But it was delicious. And Steenberg doesn't get mentioned that often, from the back.
But now I think, Jim, Johan Loubser was the winemaker there, and he really, with his green
and he's Silverthorn.
His Silverthorn.
And he's a lovely man as well.
He can make bubbles.
Yes.
And I think that's the history of those bubbles at Steenberg. I think he put the recipe in place.
And again, at the Cape Wine Guild, I had a chat with him, and what a charming man.
No, he's lovely.
And what they're producing there. So Silverthorn bubbles.
Okay. He got the Genie as well. Is that the pink one?
I don't remember. I think he's got about 4 or 5, hasn't he? He's got a range.
Yeah. Okay, so Steenberg, I will write all these things down. Steenberg bubbly, says Mr. Sampson.
But then there are the classics, and there are so many classic ones.
Pongratz, everybody drinks Pongratz. How can we forget
Distel.
Distel? How can we forget Twee Jonge Gezellen?
Twee Jonge Gezellen.
What's it called? It's called Kaapse Simonsig.
Simonsig. And Simonsig is probably, everything else is MCC, and that's I can't say it, Kaapsversonkel. Yes.
Kaapsversonkel, you're so British. Can you speak Afrikaans there, Jeremy?
I'm Becky.
Says she, who's lived in South Africa for most of her life and can't speak an African language, which in itself is disgraceful. So I'll forgive you for not speaking
Let's move on quickly.
Let's
getting
move
embarrassed here.
Let's move on. So, Kaapsversonkel is absolutely brilliant. And then I honestly cannot leave out Lourmarin, because Mr. Rupert has done whatever he had to do, and that Lourmarin's brut is delicious. When it first came out, I had my doubts, and I thought, it's like every other bubbly from South Africa. It's nice. It's amper mani. It's almost French, but not. And then I was thinking to myself, I was being a bit sort of snobbish and what have you, but I do love French bubbles. And you have to give them, even though we have to cancel the whole of the history of the world, I refuse to cancel champagne. You can't. So the French have got it right when it comes to bubbly, but you look at people like Bubbles Ferreira, who has spent a lifetime studying and doing and making, and he's released some of his own Bubbles labels. Have you seen them?
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised how many different wine producers now have a Bubbles version as well.
Yeah.
And they can be very, very good quality.
Oh, no, they are.
You talked to Mr. Rupert just now as well. I mentioned to you I was at a wine tasting at Rupert and Rothschild.
Yes, what was it like?
And they only give you 3 wines. I think it was a Chardonnay and 2
Of course they are,
reds.
because they're on a budget, aren't
Because
they?
they're on a budget, but they give you a good portion.
Money
it's not a thimble.
in that stable.
But we stayed on for lunch there, and if you want to really spoil yourself, go there, and you'll have to book, I'm told, but go and stay there for lunch. We were there, as I say, a few weeks ago, so beginning of the season, and having had the tasting and thinking, this is rather nice, why start looking for somewhere else to go to? And we stayed there, and it was brilliant. So highly recommend it. But back to Bubbles, would you go to Cabriere, Mr. Von Arnhem, and what's he producing?
You can't skip him
Pierre
out,
Jordan and that sort of thing.
he's just such a character in the industry, and I mean, to start off your tour of Franschhoek on that hill with Achim doing some sabrage and the cork flying out in front of your face. I don't think he does it anymore. I don't think he's doing all of that. I think that his son is running the place, really.
His health, I've heard, has
Not
taken a
good.
knock.
Yeah.
But, his reputation lives on.
You know what is fun as well? We can't really do that was the year that was in wine and forget about my darling Skulk, ex-winemaker from Rupert and Rothschild. Skulky.
And where is he now?
So he is at a farm called Thaibosch,
Oh, yes.
which used to be Cordoba.
And I went out and bought a couple of bottles.
Did you go and get
Yes,
some?
Yes, when I heard about that.
It is delicious, but Skulky makes a wine, which I think is lovely, for the holiday period called Pink Lady. A typical Saint-Tropez style rosé. It is uber sexy. You want a few bottles of that in your fridge for the Christmas holidays, I promise you.
And served so cold.
Served icy, freezy cold, and it is really, really smart wine. So you want some Pink Lady rosé. We've given you so much.
I've got a Le Brie rosé as well. I
That's
think it's
nice.
a Pink Door or something like that.
Yeah.
But that also is delicious. But
Rosés-
you're raising rosé again, which we tend to forget. And a
Always
dry rosé, frozen, takes a lot of beauty.
Yeah, very, very cold. There's a reason why it's so popular in the Mediterranean, because it is very thirst quenching, and a lot of the time it's lower in sugar and lower in alcohol than the rest, depending upon how it's been made, as is the case with sparkling wine. Low sugar, low alcohol. And we don't want to spend the whole holiday season inebriated and getting too fat. So that's a good...
No, things like about 11%, isn't it? That
Yeah.
sort of at lunchtime, fine.
Perfect.
Get a bit above that, and all right,
Yeah.
you can have a little rest. Nothing wrong with that. And come back
When
for
you
more
get old
later.
like us, you're allowed to rest whenever you
I
like.
think they call it a siesta or something.
Yeah, in reality, it's actually just sleeping off the booze. That's really what it is. Is there anything else that we've forgotten? Beer. Have you tasted any nice beer during the year?
I think just
Any crafty beers?
Belgian beer. I don't. I think
not
craft
like
beers
Erdinger.
are sometimes a bit overrated.
You almost
and-
eat the craft beer for breakfast,
well,
don't
some
you?
of them
'Cause they're
are
quite malty.
a bit rough on the.
Yeah.
Yes, but again, the Belgian beers are still so silky and they just flow so well. And
And having said beer, I mean, you, Tom, you must have had Christmas ale at the pub.
you know, I come from the West Country of England, so I
Don't
drink
start getting
cider.
snooty and fancy on
I
me.
drink cider, not scrumpy, but to have a good glass of cider still takes a lot of eating, especially if you've got
Cider's gorgeous.
some
You can
pork
get
or
real-
something like that.
Yeah.
The apple coming
With the
through,
gammon.
and of course then go on to Calvados or something like that if you really
So
want to get
ciders
fancy.
are good, but we haven't got, well, I suppose got one of the biggest cider brands in the world in the form of Savannah, but we're talking about rather more handcrafted ciders than that. But Christmas ale is barley wine, which is like beer. It's
Yeah.
like that malted beer, which is gorgeous if it's going to be cold at Christmas time.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
And then mulled wines and things like that, heat things up. Put
you-
some cinnamon sticks
I was
in.
going to say, have you got a recipe for mulled wine? Because that's quite nice for
I
when you're
actually
cooking
have.
turkey.
I actually have. I've got a Trade of Vic's book from the Hilton Hotel in London on about 1,000 recipes, and mulled is one of them.
I think you better send me one of those recipes, that recipe. And at some stage I'm going to get my beloved Callum to put it on somewhere, wherever all of this stuff happens. We'll put your mulled wine recipe on for Christmas. Can we do that, Cal? I think that's us. I think that's a wrap.
I think, just to sum up, we have so much to celebrate. I think we all need some good news. We need something, call it escapism if you want to, but I think one of the jewels in the crown of South Africa, and there are a few, one of them is our wines and brandies.
Yeah,
they are
for sure.
absolutely, truly brilliant. But try something new, explore a bit.
Try something new. And now you've just said that, and we've run out of time, so we can't do too much more. But the brandy and the port that comes with the Christmas puds and things. But we'll have to talk about that another time. But I do agree. We have lots to celebrate. If it had been later, we would have had a glass of something in front of us here, and we would have cheersed everybody, because I think you've got a lovely long list of Jeremy's favourites and some of my favourites for the Christmas holidays. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Karen.
Always gorgeous to spend time shooting the breeze with you.
And happy drinking.
Happy drinking. Thank you.
Carefully.
Another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.